Here we go. Hello, we are recording. Hi, everybody. My name is Stacy Now. I'm the Executive Director of the Kansas African American Affairs Commission, back with another Lunch and Learn. I am thrilled, I tell you, to be joined by Maryam Abid of the Voter Network. Hello.
Hi. I am so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So we only have a half an hour and we've got a lot of information to cover. So yes. I want to introduce you to the audience real quickly. Maryam Abid is the Volunteer Engagement Coordinator for the Voter Network, a nonpartisan nonprofit organization focused on creating stronger communities in Kansas through voter education and engagement. Maryam is from Pakistan, and she moved to the United States in January 2021 for her graduate degree at KU. After graduating last May, she worked with the Voter Network on their relational Get Out the Vote campaign and for the November general election in November 2023 under Kansas Interfaith Action, KIFA, another organization near and dear to my heart. She started with the Voter Network in a full-time capacity this February. Maryam has a deep self-interest in voicing the unheard and empowering voices of the underrepresented. Underrepresented. Her graduate degree focuses on the effects of policy making by certain power groups on minorities. Now she is practically doing this while working with the Voter Network by educating people on their power of the vote, providing them with resources to vote, and ensuring that no Kansan voice remains unheard. Yay! All things I'm in support of. So my first question, it's a Lunch and Learn. What did you have for lunch? We're recording this after lunch. What did you have for lunch?
Can I be very honest? I am actually going to have lunch right after this because I have a late lunch and I'm going to have white rice with a gravy of black chickpeas that I made, and I'm very excited about it.
Fantastic. I did have lunch. I just had a leftover sandwich from Panera that didn't get eaten yesterday.
It did get the job done for a Monday.
Ham and veggies, you know what I'm saying? Can't go wrong. Okay, so now the Voter Network. I have had Lindsay Ford on twice before, so longtime watchers of this little Lunch and Learn are familiar with the Voter Network. How did you come to the Voter Network? I know in your bio it said you came to the Voter Network from KIFA. Love me some KIFA and Modi Reber, but how did you come to the Voter Network?
So as my bio states, I actually graduated last May in 2023 from KU, and I was job hunting, and I'm very, I really wanted to get into the sector where we empower folks who are generally not heard in systems. I'm a very big supporter of talking about systematic problems instead of like grassroots organization, very important, but always hitting the systematic problems. And I think that's why voting is very important. So when I was doing that, I saw Lindsay, on LinkedIn actually, posting for a job. And that's how I got connected with Lindsay. She connected with me with KIFA, and I worked on the relational Get Out the Vote program for the November election. It's a paid, version of the program that we do for voter to voter. And it really gave me an insight into smaller cities because KIFA was working with the smaller cities like Newton, Salina. It was a very eye-opening experience for me. And after that, Lindsay reached out to me and I started working with them full time in February. So that's how I kind of got social media, actually.
Social media. There you go. It's actually good for something.
Yeah. And I just read the job description. I was like, in awe of what they were doing.
Fantastic. So now for those people who may not have seen my first two shows on the Voter Network, can you give us just an overview of what the Voter Network is and what is your focus?
Yeah, so the Voter Network is a nonpartisan, first of all, organization, and we are a not-for-profit 501c3 organization. Our main focus is to get people education about voting, how you vote, where to vote, who is on your ballot, what are the things you might think you don't know about voting, like when you should go, when are the times when you can early vote, like all of these informations, any questions you might have about voting. So, educating people about that and trying to get to the communities which are usually not representative.
Right.
Represented, I'm sorry, English is not my first language, but, represented in the, systems like in our state houses. So getting that information out to the people who actually do need it, people who don't usually vote. And getting them, that information. So maybe we can get that one barrier out that you don't have that information.
Right. And you use this phrase relational engagement.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
It's a fancy coin term, but it really is kind of like what we're doing, talking to people that people of, the networks that you do know. So talking to people about voting, but people who you already know, your personal friends, your family, your book club members. We actually have a biker team, so people you bike with, so people you already have a connection with, who you trust and they trust you. So getting this information to these people who don't have a mistrust towards you.
Right,
I think
right.
that, yeah.
So, and I do have your slide deck. So whenever you're ready to go to the slide deck, we can.
Yeah, go for it.
Let me get this added. There we go. Okay. And I
Yeah.
will just advance it as you say.
All right, we can go to the next slide. This is our pretty, thing. So we already talked a little bit about the Voter Network, right? As it says, it's a nonprofit. I would really like to say that all our resources are also nonpartisan. So, we never tell you who to vote for. We just, give you information on how you can make voting easier for you and actually also your friends, which I've been doing. So, we have different resources, non-partisan comprehensive online ballot guide, which is also available in English and Spanish. So ksballot.org or kspaleta.org. We also give out election timelines for each election, template emails, flyers, social media graphics. We also kind of give you training on how you would like to start these conversations with people, and access to our voter to voter program, which will go a little bit into detail in a little bit. Yeah.
Next slide.
Yeah. Okay, so I think all your people will already know a lot of this, but I kind of like to start this conversation with creating a problem statement. I'm a graduate, so I really like making my thesis problems at the start. And one of the things with Kansas or in this, uh, work is that we have disparities in two places: registration and turnout. And those disparities, we look at it through a race, ethnicity, as well as age lens, because we really need to talk about the fact that the same people are voting again and again. Those people are whiter, wealthier, so we have this problem of getting these people representative. These are the people who vote. They also, which is why you have the policies which also show these people, right? So we kind of talk about how we need to also increase the registration for people who are not registered. And I have not added that slide because we got some data from Target Smart, Lindsay Hyde, them, and we got some data back from them on unregistered voters, specifically people of color. And even though people of color only make up like 18% of Kansas GOP, 33% of them are unregistered. So right off the this is not divided right now by Black, Hispanic, and Asian American voters, but imagine that that's that big of a divide. Usually white voters are actually registered at a very higher rate. One of the things, and this was very interesting to me because a lot of people get registered at the DMV, but that's already these are people who have access to a car, and
Right.
right? So that's a disparity for money, who has access to those resources. So we want to create that, make sure that people know that this disparity right off the bat happens at voter registration. And we're not even talking about turnout, because not everybody who registers does it intentionally, right? Just because they're registered to vote does not mean they're going to get out to vote. And that's
Right.
something we are going to that's the next step or focus of our program, that first you reach out to these voters who are unregistered at a very higher rate than the rest of the population. And then then getting them to actually turn out to vote is when we need those people, right? And I'm
Right.
going to show you some turnout data sets that we have on the next slide to kind of show you how it really is. So yeah, this is from the 2022 general election program, that the turnout effort, numbers that we have. As you can see, right on the right side, the white voters usually, out of the registered voters, which is almost like above 90% of people who are of age to vote, white voters are registered. So out of them, 58% actually do come out to vote. In 2022, they did, right? But if you can see on, Asian American or Black Americans and Hispanic voters, they are coming out at much lower levels. You can see the 2022 general election. Hispanic voters came out at like 29%, and 35% of Black voters came out, while less than 50% of Black voters are even registered to vote. So this is like, out of the registered voters, there's even lesser of them coming out to actually vote, which is, something we want to tackle. And as you can see, you can see both for the primary and the general election, the numbers. So yes, we need not only to increase the registered number, but the people who are already registered, we want them coming out to vote, because this is their power. This is how they can make sure that the problems that they are, dealing with on a day-to-day basis, they can make their officials heard about it, right?
Yes. Cool. All right.
Yeah. Okay. Another thing, like, as we said, we see it a lot, older people coming out to vote more, right? I actually volunteered as a poll monitor with ACLU for the primary, and I was like, I live in Douglas County, Lawrence, so I was right outside the election polling office, right? And I was there from 5-6 hours. I saw a lot more white older people coming out to vote during the primary than younger voters. And despite of race, right, there are a lot more older people who are coming out to vote. And it's not necessarily that because they don't care, because as you can see, this data set is very interesting to me, because
Yes.
I was here in the US in 2022, and that's when I was really understanding the political landscape here. And as you can see in the primary, because we had a ballot amendment, 41% of younger voters, 18 to 24, actually came out to vote, so they do care a lot of times. And it was the push to make sure that that information is given to these people in a manner which is digestible, that all of these people voted, right? So we need to make sure that that trend keeps up there, because that trend kind of got a little bit lower during the general election. But I will show you that at the end I actually added a slide for just turnout by age through our voter to voter program, to see that these younger folks really, they have access to so much misinformation, a lot of information. We are chronically online, so to make sure that they actually get information from trusted resources, people they know, friends. I talk to my friends and I'm like, I just tell them about the ballot card and they're like, oh, I did not know this existed. So these things are really, yeah, we can go to the next slide.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, so our biggest program, which I'm going to talk, which we are focusing on here, is Voter to Voter. This is actually like a website that Lindsay and the team made, and it's really awesome because I've seen a lot of we talked about relational in the start, right? This is like a way of just talking to people, and there are a lot of apps, websites which work with that. But this is a website which Lindsay and the Voter Network created, Voter to Voter. And it's amazing because what it does is it gives you access to public data about voter history. And we have actually divided up those voter histories by your propensity scores, how likely you are to vote. Because another thing, the more likely you are to vote, the more likely people are going to talk to you, like candidates, campaigns are going to talk to you about voting, while others are, a little bit behind, right? So it's a targeted, effort, making data-driven decisions on people who are not getting that information. So we give you access to that information, and we create teams. We currently have 2,000 plus volunteers and 500 teams, and they're talking to 41,000 voters statewide, which is pretty awesome. So you can create your own team, or you can just join a voter to voter team. So and it's all volunteer led. So that's pretty awesome. These are people who really care about Kansas. Yeah. So as I said, relational get out the vote program, right? Who the message comes from is just as important as the message. I cannot stress this enough. I have friends who have not voted. And I'm like, well, first of all, no shame. It is something that everybody inherently thinks that you should know, while nobody gives you an education on that. I remember the first time I voted, I was 18, and I was like, how do I make sure that you're registered to vote? So these things, it's giving that information to the people, right? But also when you talk to a person you already know, they're more likely to listen to you. It's easier to start a conversation even. It's harder to, and again, because we want to target people who usually do not get that information, probably canvassers are not talking to them, right?
Right.
Because they want to talk to people who are already likely to vote. So the people who are not doing that, yesterday I went to lunch with a friend and I was talking to her about it, and she was like, "Oh, I did not know that, that's even a thing, that, just giving voter education." And she is very apathetic about voting, but we had like our conversation about this. And, just because she trusted me enough that I wouldn't judge her for this conversation, right? So it really matters who is talking to you about this. Also, another thing, this is one of the things which actually really kind of, made me really happy to apply for the voter network when I was doing it, is, and I remember Lindsay saying this, that, we don't think that we are the right messenger a lot of the times, right? Because a lot of people, what in order to have relatability, right, we need to, when we are reaching out to populations which are underrepresented, right, we need those people so that they have that relatability to talk to each other, right? So what we do is we provide resources. We have all the resources, so we create, get that barrier out so that you can talk to people, in a, easier way, in a civil
Mm-hmm.
way, civic way, right? So, so that you can actually talk to them about this, so that you can have conversations. And it's also sometimes just really hard to ask these questions, just because people think it would be weird to not know this, right?
Right.
So,
I myself, I have a voter team. I've been,
yeah,
I guess ambassador is the word that you call it. So I have a
yeah.
voter team, and I've had one since 2022, I think is when I started. And
Mhm.
it's really that, because we have access, like you say, you have access to the data, which may seem weird, but everyone's voter history is public knowledge. So
Yes.
I purposefully pulled my list, because I would look up people, and I
Yeah.
purposely chose people who were not on Facebook, or at least not on Facebook a lot,
Yes.
so that they may not be seeing all my personal posts saying, this is what's going on, this is what's going on. So I purposely went and found people who were not on Facebook, but who were
Mhm.
friends of mine, and also who were these low propensity
Mhm.
voters who
Yes.
seemingly did not vote very often.
Mhm.
And, this idea that the message, it's who the message comes from. Because to your point, if I'm texting one of my friends, I could be like, hey, yo, let's go vote. And it's real informal. And they'd be like, yeah, hey, I don't know where to go vote. I'm like, oh, let's figure it out. And it's much more
Yeah.
relaxed and easy than as opposed to if the campaign contacts
Yeah.
people. And then also I wanted to say, because I have run for office before, and I can back up
Yes.
this notion that campaigns only spend money on people that they think are going to vote.
Because there's limited money, right?
Right. And I know for a fact, if I'm sending mail, or if I'm
Mhm.
calling, or if I'm texting, and Lord help me if I'm going to knock on somebody's door, there's got to be some sort of return on investment. And so campaigns they just don't invest in people who historically don't vote, which is why certain zip codes may not get
Mhm.
targeted, because if the zip code doesn't have a high turnout rate, the
Mhm.
campaign is not going to spend money. So it's kind of like this spiral that feeds itself down. Um,
Exactly. And again, they have limited resources. They're not going to convince you to vote, Only like there needs to be a certain level of trust to be convinced of something, right? By somebody. Like, for example, I like just how you were saying, my roommate, I know she recently moved. So I was looking, like, I was adding her to my voter to voter team. And it was just like, I was like, hey, dude, you just moved and you have not updated it. Like, it's as simple as that. With the
yeah.
primary, I had a friend, like, it's so much easier to do this stuff with friends. Like, in the primary, I went out with, like, one of my friends. They just need a little bit more push because
Yeah.
they are interested in the issues, but voting is like a little harder. So I went with them. We went to the courthouse. It was actually closed. They would have actually not gone that day.
Ah,
They were early voting. So they were like, construction is happening at the courthouse in Douglas County. So they were like, oh, it's 5:30. They're probably going to be closed at other location. But I was like, no, I have checked. Let's try it. So, we're like, we'll just go there and check it out. And we did.
yeah.
And they early voted. So, it's easier
Cool,
to do
cool.
it with people. So,
Yes,
yeah.
definitely.
this is like our structure, so to say. But essentially we ask anybody to create a team, and they are called the team leader. They're a team leader only because they're a little bit of a support system. Otherwise they are doing the same work as the ambassadors, the volunteers essentially, who sign up to on voter to voter, right? We call them ambassadors. So you create teams, you identify high propensity voters. These are voters who are frequent voters. Again, as we said, they know about what is happening, what is on the ballot usually, So these people usually sign up as ambassadors so that they each pick 10 people, 10 of their friends who might not be frequent voters. We call them infrequent or low propensity voters, and just talk to them about voting. And it's even easier because we will send you weekly emails when we are in the election cycle to remind you, hey, you're an ambassador on our team. Have you talked to your contact list about voter registration? The deadline is coming up, or early voting is starting. Similarly with team leaders, we actually send them separate emails that, hey, check on your ambassadors. They might need a little bit of a push from you, to talk to your contacts. So yeah, it's very simple. It's not that big of an ask because it doesn't really take much time.
Right. I know, because I guess I'm at the ambassador level here, and
Yeah.
I have more than 10. I just looked at my
Wow.
team before I get on here. I've got 32 people. So there's 32 people.
We need to send you a recognition award or something.
I know. I don't know. I'm sure there's people. I know. In fact, I know there's people who have more than 32. And I sort of have a control, my husband and my mom, because I know they vote. So if they show up as voting, I'm like, okay, then the data is coming in. And then to your point, I text probably about 7 or so weeks out. Hey, there's an election coming up. And it's copy and paste. So it's very simple. I just have a copy paste. It's a short text. Hey, there's an election coming up. Do you have a plan to vote? And then I wait a week and I don't say anything. And then when early voting starts, I may text, hey, early voting has started. And especially if I live in Johnson County, so I may have a screenshot of where all the early voting options are. I do have a few people who are not in Johnson County. I have a few friends in Lawrence. I have a few friends outside of the Johnson County area, but I'll still be like, hey, early voting is starting. And I have looked up where the locations are in Lawrence to text to people. So it's providing information. And really, like you said, people want information.
Yeah, and I will also say that, as you just said, that we also have some sample text messages and emails even on our website, thevoternetwork.org, right? That if you are are a little bit hesitant, just look it up, and I have a lot of teams because I'm the volunteer coordinator, right? So I talk to some of the team leaders who are they send it to their email list. So, they have 10 people. So we have sample emails, and they just personalize it because it's a lot easier to edit, right?
Yes.
They're actually started. Okay, so this is what it looks like inside the program. As you can see, first of all, this is all public data, and we have just made it more accessible and easier to digest. Second of all, we can never see who you vote for, only that you voted or not voted, right? So that's very important information. And as you can see, so Amanda is a 4, right? So Amanda is somebody you would want as an ambassador on your team because they don't really need those reminders. But Bianca will actually need a little bit of a reminder and actually a proper, plan to vote, because this is another thing. If somebody is like, hey, I'll vote, but if you actually make a plan with them to vote, hey, when exactly are you planning to vote? Or are you, this week is, I know it's easier for you, so would you want to go together this week or something like that, right? So these are people who need more push. And you have those 2 columns of general 2020 and primary 2020, right? They're also helpful because they tell you if somebody early voted, so they will turn this teal check mark, and that you don't need to bother them about this anymore. And it's also very helpful to vote early because this gets updated every day when in early voting. So that's also very, very helpful to know. Yeah. Okay, now I want to nerd out on why it actually works. Really important. So this is the Voter Networks. Lindsay has been doing this since 2018, right? And we have this data from 2018 till 2023. Now, as you can see, presidential elections, right? People do come out to vote at higher rates. Still, I think we need to really focus on it because 50 to 60%, that's really our voter turnout statewide. Or at most, I think it has gone at 72, right? Which is in 2020 election. But as you can see, the statewide turnouts for local elections as well are a lot lower. But even for
Yes.
presidential election, the teal marks for voter to voter. So these are people who are volunteers reached out to. These are their friends, family, people they knew, right? And the likelihood of turning out to vote increased by 20% even in 2020. In 2023, which is a local election year, like a lot of people don't really know and everything, right? So even then it doubled with and
Yeah.
this is just a volunteer effort. So
That's
if
impressive.
exactly. So if you know them, it's going to work. And again,
Right.
it's not the end all of it, right? It's not necessary that everyone you talk to will vote, but
Right.
finding.
And this, I mean, yeah. And this, I mean, this shows that if we contact people who either do or don't vote, but just this notion of having a personal reminder from a friend, not a personal reminder from a campaign or a personal
Mm-hmm,
reminder from a commercial, but from a
mm-hmm.
friend really helps people turn out to vote. And that is impressive, like in 2021 and 2023, which are
Yeah,
considered off years where people tend to not vote. And you can see the voter turnout, like in 2021, 19% is abysmal. But to still have it
yeah.
be 4% of the people who were reached out through voter to voter is very impressive.
Exactly. Like, it's something that one of the things that works, right?
Yeah.
If specifically, if you're somebody like me who probably won't be like, are a little bit like, I love talking to strangers, but I probably would not like knock at a door personally, right?
Right.
I'm a little afraid. So this is something that even though, and another tidbit, I'm not a US citizen, so I cannot actually vote in the US, but, I love talking to my friends about it. And there's so many friends I have now who know this and have created their teams just for their family members or,
Yeah,
their groups. So it's pretty impressive.
definitely.
Okay, so this is the propensity scores. Since we are in a presidential election year, so these scores are from 0 to 4. You will see it in voter to voter as well. They're based on the fact that whether this voter voted in the last 4 general elections. So if they voted in the last 4 general elections, it will be a 4. If they voted in only one of those last 4 general elections, it will be a 1. And if they did not vote in the last 4 years, it will be a 0. So by definition, the twos usually do, vote in the presidential election. So they do need a push during the primary, but in the general election, they probably are going to vote. It's like, really up to you if you kind of remind them or not. But the zeros and ones, these are the people who really do need a reminder. And
Right.
as you
Yeah.
yeah, and this is from November 2020, right? So as you can see, the zeros, the statewide turnout was 41%, but the people who have never voted in in the last 4 years, and if their friend reached out to them, the turnout rate increased, like the likelihood to turn out increased to 68%, which is pretty amazing,
Yeah.
honestly, because they've not been to a polling place in the last 4 years. So, this is how we know that it's working.
It works. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know I had a friend of mine on my list who was a zero. And I
Mm-hmm.
also know that the data shows that if a person, usually if they haven't voted by the time they're like 30 or something or 35, they're not going to vote at all. So I had a person,
Mm-hmm.
she was a zero, contacted her, hey, there's an election. And she had questions. And when she voted, she got back to me. She's like, thank you, because I had a little anxiety around voting. I just didn't know. I just didn't
Mm-hmm.
know. And so I agree. This is why one of the reasons why I'm so pro voter network and encouraging people to talk to their friends. And because I do believe there are a lot of people who want to vote, but they just feel like they just don't know. Right. And so
Exactly.
having someone that they feel comfortable asking questions to is just it's so very helpful. So I think it's
Exactly. And like an election like this year, there are actually so many more things than, which are on the ballot. Your whole Kansas state legislature, like, the state House of Representatives. So getting that information out to people is also very important because somebody who is in the works, they just take it for granted that, everybody knows all of this,
yeah,
what is
but everyone
happening,
doesn't.
right?
I know.
But they don't. So, it's very
Yeah,
important.
they don't. Yeah.
So this is like, as we talked about earlier, that, younger voters don't come out enough, right? So this is our data from the last, presidential election year. And as you can see, the statewide turnout for the 18 to 24s, 59%. For the 25 to 34 years old, 55%. And for people who did talk, that increased from 25 to 30%. So this is very important because, as you said, there's a lot of research. If somebody has not voted and until they're 35, it's very hard to create that habit for them, right? So creating this habit of talking to them early on so that they create this habit, they become voters. Also, because there is actually so much data to back up that voters, people who vote generally are more educated. They have better health outcomes, because they have done this responsibility as a citizen, right? So they, your representatives, they can ask them questions. They reach out to them when they're not happy with things. So, these younger voters, making them vote as and lessening those barriers to voting is really important for these voters.
Yeah. Train them young.
Yes. So yeah, that's,
I think that's the last, that may be the last slide.
Yeah. Oh,
okay.
That's awesome.
So it's like a half an hour too. We're at 31 minutes, but thank you for coming on and talking to us about Voter to Voter. And I will, when this airs, I will definitely put down, it's votertovoter.org, right? And when you go there, let me remove this so I can see. When you go to votertovoter.org, one can sign up to be an ambassador and start building their team.
Yes.
And I know, I'm glad that I've had Voter to Voter on several times, because honestly, I knew about Voter to Voter for about a year before I even did a team. So for people who may have heard of Voter to Voter, here's your push to say, please go start a team, because then you can help people who've heard about voting, but actually go vote. It's just the way to really help people to feel comfortable.
I will also say, because we focus on people who you're talking to, I have seen this, and this is something, again, there's different facets of work that we do in this. Like, some people, you will maybe talk to them this year and they might not, create a team or anything, but next year they might be more interested. And that I have seen that in my friends. I've seen that in myself, of like that, creating that, your mindset changes, your behavior changes. So,
yep. It's even for me, that's the same thing. I was slow to start a team, and now I have a team, and now I've got 30 people on my team, and I'm like a texting fool. All right. Well, thank you so much. I have always the Black community. Where'd you go?
Yes, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, okay. The Black community oftentimes doesn't turn out like, when you looked at the turnout. And I think it's so important for us to talk to the community. And I know a lot from the Black community. I hear, well, why should I vote? They don't pay attention to us. Well, part of the reason that they don't pay attention to the Black community is because the Black community doesn't vote. And it's again, having run a campaign, it's hard to spend money when you don't think people are going to turn out. So if we can help each other vote, then the campaigns will know that if a politician believes that they will lose their seat if they don't get people to vote for them, they will focus on them. So it's kind of turning that around.
Especially, I am with you on that so much because, systematically, we have so many problems. And one of the ways to turn up for that, specifically for people of color, Black people, brown people, Latino people, right? The Black community needs to, this is their way of holding the people accountable, right?
Yes, definitely.
So,
well, all right. Thank you so much for just taking some time out of your afternoon and coming and talking about Voter to Voter. I will continue to be a Voter to Voter fan moving forward, and we'll have a couple of more things between now and November, talking about voting, talking about what's on the ballot, talking about just how voting runs. Like I've had the Secretary of State on recently, having Voter to Voter, and then we'll do like a ballot rundown. So keep watching this space to find out what's going on coming up ahead of the election in November. And thank you, Maryam, again.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure.
Yeah, great. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.